You can tell a lot about a neighborhood by how fast the curtains move when something happens. In mine, they fluttered like flags every time Karen opened her mouth. And that Saturday morning, they were waving in full panic mode before I'd even finished my first sip of coffee. Yes, she really called the cops on my guest. And yes, the man she reported was a detective. But the part she didn't know was that she'd just called the cops on one of their own. It started out like any other quiet weekend. I was planning to watch the game, grill a little, and finally relax after a week that had chewed me up. My buddy Matt was coming over. Old friend from college, now a detective with the city police. We hadn't seen each other in months. I remember hearing the rumble of his truck before I even saw it. A black SUV pulling slowly into the driveway, sunlight catching the badge-shaped keychain dangling from his mirror. I went to the kitchen window to wave, but the sight on the street made me stop cold. Karen, our self-appointed HOA president, protector of mailboxes, ruler of lawns, and apparently the neighborhood's unofficial security chief. She was standing dead center in the road, hands on hips, blocking Matt's way like she was guarding the gates of heaven. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, her uniform of power. Matt leaned out his window, polite smile on his face. "Morning, ma'am. I'm visiting—" She cut him off before he could finish. "You can't park here. Residents only. This is private property." He gave her a confused look. "Private? I'm visiting a friend. Dial 1 Redstone." "That's my neighbor's house," she barked. "And you didn't get clearance. We have rules." I watched it unfold from behind the curtain, disbelief turning to frustration. I should have known better. Karen lived for moments like this, to feel important, to make someone kneel at the altar of her HOA authority. By the time I reached the door, she was already circling his vehicle like a predator inspecting prey. "Unregistered vehicle, tinted windows, suspicious behavior," she muttered into her phone like she was narrating an episode of Cops. "Karen," I called out, stepping onto the porch. "He's my guest." She turned sharply, eyebrows lifting in false shock. "Your guest? Without prior notice? That's a violation of Section 8A, unauthorized visitor access." I sighed. "Karen, he's a friend. We're just watching the game. He brought donuts." She glanced at the pink bakery box in Matt's hands like it was radioactive. "And what's in that box exactly?" Matt blinked. "Donuts. Glazed, I think. Want one?" "Don't get smart with me," she snapped, then pointed at his ear. "And what's that? A recording device?" He frowned, touching his Bluetooth earpiece. No, it's—" But she was already storming off, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I'd like to report a trespasser, possibly armed. Suspicious vehicle on Redstone Lane." I felt the air leave my chest. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She didn't answer, just turned, eyes blazing with self-righteous fire. "You'll thank me when your home is safe again." Matt looked at me, half smiling. "Is she serious?" Unfortunately. We both stood there in silence for a second, the ridiculousness of it all sinking in. Then, from down the street, the distant echo of sirens. 2 police cruisers rolled into the neighborhood minutes later, lights flashing, and every curtain in every house lifted like synchronized clockwork. Karen waved them down with the confidence of a general summoning reinforcements. "Officers, over here," she cried, pointing at Matt. "That's him!" The intruder. The first officer stepped out, hand hovering near his radio. "Ma'am, we got a call about a disturbance. Who's the complainant?" "Me," Karen announced proudly. "That man was trespassing, acting suspicious, possibly carrying a weapon." The officer turned toward Matt, and that's when Karen's little power trip crumbled into dust. Matt calmly reached into his jacket, pulled out his badge, and held it up. The gold glint caught the afternoon light just right. "Detective Matthew Harris," he said. "City PD." Silence. I swear even the wind stopped. Karen's jaw fell open, the color draining from her face as her eyes darted from the badge to his face, then to the other officers. "Wait. You're what?" she stammered. Matt gave her the kind of smile only a cop who's seen everything could pull off. "Off duty today, but I'd still recommend not filing false reports." The officers beside him tried not to laugh. One of them coughed into his sleeve. Karen's face cycled through a kaleidoscope of colors. Pink, red, purple. Her clipboard trembled. I was protecting the neighborhood," she squeaked. "From donuts?" Matt asked gently. If humiliation had a sound, it would have been the laughter coming from every porch and window that afternoon. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because the next morning, when I checked my mailbox, a bright yellow envelope sat waiting for me. The HOA logo printed on top like a warning label, and I didn't even need to open it to know whose name was behind it. The letter wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of war. Karen had typed it herself. I could tell by the dramatic bold fonts and the unnecessary use of exclamation marks. It accused me of harboring unauthorized personnel, causing public disturbance, and endangering community peace. It ended with the words, "Further violations will result in legal action and HOA enforcement review." Legal action. HOA enforcement, over donuts and a handshake. I folded the paper and stared out at the street where she'd stood the day before, clipboard in hand, drunk on control. The neighborhood looked peaceful again, but I could feel her eyes behind the blinds. Watching. Waiting. Matt stopped by again that evening. "You're kidding," he said, reading the letter. "She actually filed a written complaint?" "Not just one," I replied, pulling out my phone. "She sent an email to the HOA board, too. Said you posed a threat to the safety of Redstone Lane." Matt smirked. "A detective with 2 commendations and 15 years on the force? Yeah, sounds dangerous." We both laughed, but underneath it there was a sting of something heavier. Karen wasn't just annoying, she was obsessive. And people like that don't stop when they're embarrassed. They double down. By the end of the week, she'd filed 3 more notices. 1 for parking violations, 1 for noise disturbances, and 1 for failure to comply with HOA spirit code. Whatever that meant. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But then she crossed the line. Saturday morning, I woke up to shouting outside. I ran to the porch, and there she was again, standing in my driveway taking photos of my license plate. "Karen, what are you doing?" "Documenting evidence," she snapped. For the record, Matt had just arrived, coffee in hand. He froze, watching her circle his SUV again like a bloodhound. "Evidence of what?" he asked. "Your activities." She barked. "This is a private HOA community. You have no jurisdiction here," Matt sighed, trying to stay calm. "Ma'am, I'm not investigating anyone. I'm visiting a friend." But she wasn't listening. Her voice rose, shrill and full of power she didn't have. "This entire neighborhood is tired of your harassment. I have every right to—" And then it happened. Matt reached into his jacket, not for his badge but for his phone. He hit record. "Karen," he said, his tone sharp now, "you've just admitted to harassment and trespassing. I'd recommend you step off private property immediately." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The confidence that usually filled her eyes flickered. For a second, she looked small, like she'd realized she'd picked the wrong fight. She backed away slowly, muttering, "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Matt replied. "But you'll regret it first." She spun on her heel and stormed off, and I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. The next morning there was a different kind of knock on my door. Not the polite tap of a neighbor or the impatient thud of an HOA notice. This one was firm, official. When I opened it, 2 federal agents were standing there, badges gleaming. "Morning, sir," one said. "We're with the FBI. We'd like to ask you a few questions about a complaint filed by your HOA president." I blinked. "The FBI? You've got to be kidding." The taller agent shook his head. "No, sir, we're not." Behind them, I saw Karen watching from across the street. Arms folded, smirk spreading like she'd finally won, but she had no idea she was about to lose everything. They stepped inside like they'd done this 100 times. Calm, polite, but sharp-eyed. You could tell they were reading everything. The layout, the tone of my voice, the half-drunk mug of coffee on the table. The taller one introduced himself. "Agent Rowe, this is Agent Mitchell. We're investigating a federal complaint related to harassment, impersonation of law enforcement, and possible obstruction." Matt, who'd just arrived, froze mid-step. "Excuse me?" Agent Rowe turned to him. "You are Detective Matthew Harris, correct?" Matt nodded slowly, flashing his badge. "That's right. 15 years with the department." Rowe exchanged a glance with his partner. That subtle look investigators give each other when something isn't adding up. I handed them the stack of HOA notices, emails, and Karen's complaint printouts. "She's been filing harassment reports non-stop," I said. "Every one of them false." Agent Mitchell scanned the papers, eyes narrowing. "This woman claims you threatened her, obstructed an HOA investigation, and impersonated an officer." Matt laughed under his breath. Impersonated? I am an officer. Rowe tilted his head, voice even. That's what we're here to confirm. Because the number of reports coming from this address, and the same complainant, raised red flags. Someone's been trying to weaponize federal channels. And right there, I saw the shift. The agents weren't investigating us. They were checking out her. Matt leaned on the counter. She's been harassing everyone on this street. But this calling the FBI? That's a new level, Rowe nodded. We thought so too. Her calls were unusual. She contacted multiple federal offices, claiming she had evidence of police corruption, drug activity, and organized trespassing. I blinked. Organized what? Her words, Mitchell said flatly. Not ours. They asked a few more questions, took copies of the HOA documents, and thanked us for our time. Before leaving, Rowe turned back. Just so you know, filing false reports with federal agencies is a serious crime. If she's misusing our system, we'll find out. Matt gave a small smile. You might want to check her emails. She's been sending threats disguised as HOA memos. Rowe's eyebrow lifted. Good to know. And then they were gone. Across the street, Karen was waiting, pretending to trim her bushes, glancing up every few seconds. When she saw the agents leave without handcuffs or confrontation, her smile faltered. Then the unexpected happened. Not 2 hours later, the same black SUV, but this time with FBI markings, rolled back into the neighborhood. They didn't stop at my house. They stopped at hers. The sight froze me where I stood. Karen burst out onto her porch, confusion written all over her face. One of the agents showed his badge. The other handed her a file. Her confident stance melted. The color drained from her cheeks as she read the paper. Neighbors started gathering on sidewalks. Curtains parted. Phones recorded. Ma'am, I heard Rowe say clearly, you are being investigated for filing false federal reports and obstruction of justice. Her voice shook. You can't be serious. I was protecting the community. From what? He asked calmly. Donuts and lawn chairs? Even from across the street I could see her trembling. The woman who'd ruled this block with her clipboard and threats now stood speechless on her porch, hands shaking as the agents entered her house. 1 hour later, they came out with boxes, files, devices, and a computer tower. Karen tried to shout to reclaim control, but her voice cracked under the weight of silence and stares. When they finally drove off, she was left standing in her driveway, the same spot where she'd once tried to stop a police detective. The irony was impossible to ignore, but I didn't smile. Not yet. Because I knew people like Karen don't go down easy. By Monday morning, the whole neighborhood buzzed like it had been plugged into a rumor mill. You couldn't walk 10 steps without hearing whispers. About the agents, the boxes, and Karen's frozen face when they left. Everyone who'd once feared her now suddenly remembered how much they'd always thought she went too far. The same people who hid behind their blinds while she barked orders were now gossiping on their lawns like it was a community picnic. I didn't join them. I just watched, because I knew the silence that comes after humiliation, that eerie calm before someone like Karen makes their next desperate move. It came faster than I expected. That afternoon, an email pinged my inbox. Subject, Emergency HOA meeting. Attendance mandatory, of course. She wasn't done. The meeting was held in the community center, a beige room with too many folding chairs and not enough ventilation. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry bees. Karen stood at the front, back straight, chin high, her smile stretched tight enough to crack. Around her sat the HOA board, 3 people who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. A few residents whispered behind their hands, waiting for the show. Karen tapped the mic. Good evening, everyone. I understand there have been misunderstandings regarding recent events, false reports, exaggerated rumors, all designed to undermine the integrity of this association. The arrogance in her voice made my teeth clench. She went on about preserving order, neighborhood safety, and external interference. It was like listening to a politician caught red-handed still, insisting they'd done it for the people. Then, she turned her gaze toward me, and as for Mr. Sanders and his associate, the so-called detective, their actions have brought unnecessary federal scrutiny to this community. I will be filing a motion to suspend their voting rights within the HOA pending review. The room went still. Matt, sitting beside me in plain clothes, didn't move. He just crossed his arms and said quietly, She's still digging. Before I could speak, a voice from the back interrupted. Karen, when exactly are you planning to explain the federal investigation into you? Heads turned. It was Mrs. Callahan, 70 years old, gentle, always polite. But tonight her voice was steel. Karen's smile twitched. I'm not under investigation. That's disinformation. Mrs. Callahan raised her phone. Funny, because my nephew works for the county office. He told me the FBI's already confirmed your misuse of emergency systems. Want to tell us how many 911 calls you made last month? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone else stood. Yeah, and what about the HOA funds? You've been paying for private security out of our maintenance fees. Karen's composure cracked. Those were necessary precautions. Matt stood then, slow and steady. You spent community funds to stalk your neighbors, filed false federal reports, and accused me of impersonating myself. You've turned a neighborhood into a circus. And you still think you're the victim? She pointed a trembling finger at him.
You have no authority here.
He smiled faintly. Maybe not here, but they do. And right then, like a scene out of a perfectly timed movie, the double doors at the back opened. Agent Rowe stepped inside, holding a document. Ma'am, he said evenly, you were instructed not to destroy or alter HOA records. We've received evidence that you tried to delete communications from your board account. That's obstruction. Gasps filled the room. Karen froze. The board chair, a quiet man named Paul who'd spent most meetings avoiding conflict, finally spoke. His voice trembled at first, then steadied. Effective immediately, I'm calling a vote to remove Karen McAllister as president of the HOA. No one hesitated. Every hand went up except hers. She stood there, chest heaving, eyes darting between us all like a cornered animal. You can't do this. I built this neighborhood. I protected it, Paul met her glare. No, Karen, you controlled it. She slammed her clipboard onto the table, papers flying. Then she stormed out, the door slamming so hard the lights flickered. Silence followed. Heavy, final. For the first time in years, the room didn't feel suffocating. People started to breathe again. A few even smiled. Matt looked at me, that half grin back on his face. Guess she called the wrong cop. I exhaled, tension unwinding in my chest. Think she'll come back? He shrugged. People like her always try. But this time, she's not the one holding the clipboard. Outside, the sun dipped behind the houses. Warm light spilling across driveways that finally felt like home again. The HOA wasn't perfect. It probably never would be, but for the first time it was ours. And as I walked home, I realized the irony of it all. She'd called the cops to feel powerful, but in the end it was the law and the truth that took her power away.